And welcome to this Thursday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us. And we're joined, as always, on these Thursdays by the handsome one right there. You must have had a lot of action in your youth there, Mike Jones.
No,
Nobody could be this good looking at this age.
no,
You're unreal.
please, you're humbling me here. No, I would have to say that's one woman guy now is 26 years with the same woman.
Wow,
Clearly,
that's a record. Yeah.
that's a huge record for me. I'll never see it again. I won't be alive till I'm 86. But I can tell you this, that I clearly have the best end of the deal. So
No
whatever
doubt about it.
there, yeah, I feel for her every day. But yeah,
And sadly, we've had to do a lot of this lately. We have to delve into the obituary column once again here at the top of the show. A little bit of a shocker, although he was 95 years old.
yeah,
The great Gene Hackman, who was well respected by virtually everybody, not only in the industry, but anybody who was a movie fan, a fan of show business. And I used to run into Gene Hackman, believe it or not. And you can kind of tell, I mean, Mike, you're a New York guy. You can kind of tell when a guy is a good guy or not just by the way he acknowledges you, even though you might be a stranger to him.
right.
And I used to go, you find this surprising. I spent a lot of my evenings when I lived in California at Hollywood Park when they were running the Jugheads, the harness races. And he may have had an investment in harness horses, but he certainly was a frequent visitor to the track. And he used to hang around there with a guy that I know owned a couple of harness horses and probably had the best hair in the history of the world among any male. And that was Michael Landon, the guy who was Little Joe on Bonanza. And wasn't he also in Little House on the Prairie? I think he was there. And who knew that the Little House on the Prairie was laced with asbestos, as Merlin Olsen checked out as a result of mesothelioma. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, when Hackman, he would acknowledge virtually everybody. Naturally, he was going to be a draw, and yeah, you had the usual people at the track there that are they didn't even notice he was there because they're looking at the ground trying to find people who had thrown away winning show tickets. But he's one of those guys that when you gave him hey, Gino, how are you? When he sort of responded back, you could tell that he was a good guy. The essence of the guy, what was
Yeah.
that? He was a real decent human being. So strange. It sounded very much like a Vitas Garolitis situation. Remember the great tennis player Vitas
Sure.
Garolitis, and he died at a very young age. As he was, I guess, sitting next to one of those wall unit air conditioners
Mhm.
that was kicking carbon monoxide back into the house,
Yeah.
and it sounds like that kind of thing because both Hackman and his wife expected or anticipated to be a factor in this. So it sounded like some kind of gas
Yeah.
thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we have to pay homage to him. Your favorite Hackman movie was what? Was it Hoosiers?
Hoosiers, of course. Coach Dale, when you were playing a youth basketball, and I wish you could have the kids of today watch that movie. Watching the Bob Knight characteristic that they kind of used as the main
Yeah.
character, very similar, being Indiana, shooting it out there. I always said I love to be coached hard. I was a player that, if you let me go on the field and get lazy because you let me do it, it wasn't beneficial to anybody. So when I pick up the youth programs of today, and I'm one of these big mouth grandfathers that go to the field for my grandson who plays soccer and basketball, and played and coached both of them. And it's hard for me to shut up because I know it, but it's also, you're that man, crazy grandpa who's like, oh, this guy knows. But then once you meet the parents, they realize you kind of understand the game and you were a coach, you get through it all. If I was a parent, I probably wouldn't, but as a grandparent, I'd get away with it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of very interesting. And but when I think back at Coach Dale, what he did, it's that image of a coach is what I grew up with. And today we seem like we have to get along more with the players, where there it was just a complete disciplinary thing. And I love that movie. As a matter of fact, I was up this morning and Evan Cohen was bragging about the movie, saying it was his mantra to life was watching that whole thing. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting time. But that movie resonated with me as my favorite Gene Hackman movie.
A lot of sports fans would put that among the top 5 sports movies of all time. And at the same time, I think Patino kind of gave a little bit of a Hoosiers type of speech to his St. John's Red Storm the other
Yeah.
day. We all saw that after
Yeah.
they had incurred a loss to what?
Mhm.
Villanova.
Right.
And they bounced back now and were winners again last night.
Yeah.
The point spread was 6, and they managed to
Push.
get a push for you on that ball game. But yeah, it was interesting that whole philosophy of just go out there and do your best, and that's all you can do in any endeavor in life. My favorite Hackman movie, probably a toss-up. between A French Connection and a movie a little bit more obscure, but I thought it was brilliant, called The Conversation. I liked
Hmm.
him in The Firm also, which I thought was
Yeah,
a pretty good movie there,
great.
with Tom Cruise and company, looking at the legal profession. And even though he played a similar role in a lot of movies, he did it with the kind of style and panache that set him apart as one of the great actors. And of course, as many people would state, he happened to be
Mhm.
a great guy. So we're sorry about that. Also, sportscaster, I'm sure you're familiar with. Many people with
Yes.
Al Troutwig.
Yep.
Checked out, and
Yep.
I always liked him. An understated guy,
Yep.
not one of these guys that's going to be overly demonstrative or yelling and screaming, or an extremist, in a Skip Bayless type, where he
Mhm.
just spouts out things that are
Yep.
are absurd, and you can't imagine he actually believes that LeBron James sucks. But he's going to persist in doing it, very much like right wing media people are today, where you're saying, how can you possibly embrace this notion? It's absolutely preposterous.
Right.
But he was an understated and very
Yeah.
professional and easy to like sportscaster, Al Troutwig.
Yes.
And you would have to say,
Well,
are all deaths premature
yeah.
or untimely?
His
I'm going to
was.
say yes to that.
Yeah. 68 he was,
Yeah, young
back
guy.
then. Yep. But yeah, I listened to Al Troutwood growing up and, watched him up in New York and followed him on MSG Network. And yeah, fantastic.
Real good, real professional
Yeah.
guy that you could look at, and that's the highest compliment you can get in this
Yeah.
business. When somebody says, "Hey, what about DeForrest or whatever?" and they you hear them say, "Oh, he's a real pro." And
Yeah.
Troutwig would certainly fit that category. All right, if you're betting games, and we want to talk about some things here on the program today, there was a lot of stuff going on last night. Mike's got some selections for you. Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online, your ultimate game day companion. You can have the thing right there on the phone and tap into virtually everything. Mike's a dynamic in-game bettor now, and frantically sending it in once the game is in action. You can do that with Bet Online. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball, NHL, UFC. Bet Online continues to be your number one source for sports betting. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered. The odds, the stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, I've been touting this on a bunch of different shows on various platforms that we perform on here, Mike. And I think I've run this by you, and I just realized why I have no chance to cash this bet. What would you make it anyway? Because I'm looking at the Detroit Pistons, who have now won 8 straight games. This is their longest winning streak in the last 18 years. You probably have to go back to like Rick Mahorn and company to have the Pistons on an 18 game winning on an 8 game winning streak. They beat the crap out of the Boston Celtics last night, and the Celtics, as far as I could decipher, played their guys. They beat them by 20. JB Bickerstaff has taken a team that was 14-68 last year and now has them at 33-26. Last I looked, they were the 6th seed in the East, and a real possibility to move up as high as number 4. They might be a tough out. They've developed Cade Cunningham. It didn't seem like they made any dynamic transition during the offseason to account for this turnaround. So a guy that takes a team that was 14-68 and has them as a winning team and now hot at this point in the season, you're thinking has to get major consideration for Coach of the Year. But I didn't realize this. You're getting 9-1 on Bickerstaff, but the guy that's going to win it is Kenny Atkinson, who of course,
Yeah.
is coaching the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was very successful as a head coach in the league prior to this, then was a longtime assistant with the Golden State Warriors, sitting on the bench there with Steve Kerr, and gets the job in Cleveland and has them as the top team in the league. He's minus 700 to Bickerstaff's plus 900.
Hmm.
Is it worth taking a sniff on that, or is it just an automatic foregone conclusion that the team that ended up, I don't know that they will end up ultimately with the best record, but certainly they've had a remarkable year. But how can you give that the nod over what Bickerstaff has done with a team that was as downtrodden as any, a franchise that's been in the toilet for, it seems like, the last 18 years? And I think that's one of the most remarkable turnarounds I've seen.
Yeah. Here's my thought: if that 8 game goes to 15, you got to bet. It's one of these things where he's
Wait,
going to.
you won't get this price.
No, no, no. But I'm saying you take it. But I'm saying you bet it now and take a run. But you're hoping that it's going to need a 15 game run or something to really be the lead story to take it away from what Cleveland's doing. But I agree with you. I like the. I've had a funny story. Pistons last year. Bet them opening night against the Heat. They lose by 2, getting 8.5. I think this team's going to be great. They lose 21 in a row right after that. It's like, you can't. You always think you see, wow, they're young, they got talent, all this. Couple injuries here and there, and they don't, and they're changing coaches. But yeah, I think you're right about the Pistons. I've followed them all year. You can't continue to draft in the lottery consistently and not get any better unless you really don't know what you're doing. These all these sports, the drafts are so polarized now, where everybody knows everything. The bloggers, the podcasters, we all know everything about draft things, about every player, and I think it's harder to really miss players today, and especially in basketball, where they know they go to Europe and find these guys. So to me, yeah, I think it's a play. Absolutely, I would take a run at it and see what he gets. But you kind of think that the number one team in the conference, in the league, Cleveland, which was kind of unexpected, is I could see how he's 7-1, but
I can't imagine. Yeah, I mean he's minus 700. So
yeah,
you're talking about laying 700 to win 100 on a guy that everybody obviously has declared as a cinch. They haven't been listening to any of my shows, and I'm looking at this remarkable turnaround. It's funny you mentioned the draft. I remember when Mel Kiper was a novelty.
you're right.
Even though he was gargling with moose, everybody's like, "Oh, what the fuck is this guy?" He spends all his day analyzing draft picks and where they're going to go, and they had it down to the minutia of who was going to be a low sixth round pick. And he seemed kind of well, he almost acted like he was on meth when he was talking about this stuff. He was so excitable. But now everybody, as you said, is a draft expert. In the NBA, we know this. I mean, one player can make a dynamic difference
Yes.
and turn a franchise's fortunes
Mhm.
around. Witness LeBron James on any team
Right.
that he's on, they immediately become a contender. And that was a draft that was pretty spectacular. Although there was a credo there that I feel anybody should abide by if you're an NBA player. Never draft a guy with a Marx Brothers name. And when the Pistons took Darko Milicic, it changed the fortunes of several teams.
Yes.
Were in there taking Carmelo and then Dwayne Wade and, of course, Chris Bosh.
Yeah.
And all three of those teams that landed in those spots ended up benefiting from Joe Dumars making his first big blunder as an executive. Although Darko played in the league for a long time, one of those guys that is bad of a draft pick as he was. I don't know. At number 2, he was on the all Dolly Parton team as a big time
Yeah.
host. But overall, I mean, if he was taken in the second round, he would have had a reasonably distinguished career for longevity alone. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the Pistons, they didn't have the best of luck in the draft lottery. They've been awful for some time. They did get the number 1 pick in a year where there was no real exceptional standout franchise generational player. They got Cade Cunningham. Now he has developed into a top-notch player.
Mhm.
But then, I mean, they had Elgin Baylor syndrome, where remember when Elgin Baylor would be representing the Clippers and he was sitting there on a dais as they did that really boring
Right.
draft lottery show, and no matter what kind of odds the Clippers had of getting the number 1 overall pick, they never got it.
There we go.
And the Pistons were sort of in that same syndrome. They had the
Mhm.
worst record in the league last year, and I think they ended up with like the number 5 or 6 pick
Yeah. Mhm.
dropping out. So it didn't seem like there was anything extremely remarkable that happened to them in the
Mhm.
offseason. So I'm thinking I would rather put 100 up. Is that just throwing money to the wind? Should I just go out on A1A here in South Florida and throw $100 out the window, or do I bet?
I'll tell you what. You throw that 100 up. I'll take 100 on St. John's at 25-1 to win the whole thing, and we'll see what happens. I mean, that's kind of like what you're doing with those
Yeah.
bets. Those are long extended bets. You probably once you put the 100 up there for it, you forget about it, so it won't pay off till April. Who knows where we're going to be in April, making money or not making money? But yeah, I like that bet. That's not a bad thing. But like I said, you're just going to have to get into the top 4 and beat some really good teams, like the Knicks last night. Talking about their 0-7 against the 3 best teams in the league. That's what you're gonna have to do if you're Detroit. I think that win last night probably gives the young team a lot of bounce. I think it probably is a team to watch coming as I go against Philly and Phoenix. I might like the Pistons now. Looking at numbers, they might not get respect to the bigger clubs and the better clubs, the higher ranked clubs, and you get some of that. I think there's a number out tonight. I just looked at my phone. That's very intriguing too.
All
You
right.
know,
Well, what are you looking
yeah,
at there?
yeah. Well, I just saw the Minnesota's getting 6 from the Lakers. Now, Granted, the Lakers have all that with that Luka type thing game the other night that might take a little steam out of them. All that press and media coverage, everybody loving the Lakers. I don't know if that line would be 2 or 3 if it wasn't for all the hype. I mean, Minnesota just comes off an unbelievable 25-point comeback win in Oklahoma City, which is the best team, off a back to back against them where they were down 19 and took a lead at halftime, end up losing the game by 7, but then they come back with a win. I don't know, they're missing guys due to injury, but Anthony Edwards is a pretty unguardable player, and they got a lot of pieces there that are pretty good around the perimeter. They have Naz Reid, who's going to be a problem for the Lakers to guard. I like Minnesota tonight getting 6.
All right, sounds good. Of course, the Philadelphia theory, and I was with you. I'm thinking Philadelphia is dead meat, that you could just go ahead, cash a ticket every night if you were betting against the Philadelphia 76ers. So, of course, they go into New York last night. They're getting annihilated early in the ball game and appear to be dead meat. And come back in the second half. I don't think they ever got the lead in that game, but they made it real tight,
Yep.
covered the point spread, and put a dagger in the back of those that were taking our advice anyway and
Yeah.
going against the 76ers. Now, they may go right back into the tank, and this is something that happened with our theory on the University of Miami, which I was in full agreement with
Right.
you on that.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that you're not just a straight-up numbers guy, Mike Jones,
No.
because you do try to take a look at the overall body language of the team, so to speak,
Sure.
and try to determine. And this is a real asset, I think, if you're a gambler. Although a lot of people would disagree, that if you could read the room a little bit and see whether or not a team has its heart in it or is checked out, then it's a good opportunity to go in and cash many a ticket and end up with a very favorable upside record. And even if you went 7-3 backing a theory like that, what's wrong with being up 4 units, whatever your denomination happens to be? So, yeah, Philadelphia, unfortunately, went against the trend last night and ended up covering a point spread against the Knicks. So that
Well,
was a difficult one to swallow.
let me get into that. So I lay the 10 overnight line. So here's for all your trying to educate a little bit of the listener or viewer here. The game's 10. So all of a sudden, at game time, I see 8.5, 8. What happened? Why did it drop? Well, Karl Anthony Towns, their big guy, the guy who would create a lot of disadvantages for them, is out. He doesn't play. That's a disadvantage of taking the overnight line, laying the 10, feeling comfortable. So in that panic, for a little less money, there was a live bet last night at 14.5, 16.5, 13.5 that I grabbed to try to middle the game from 10, not for the amount I bet, because I always want to stick to the bet I had, even though it dropped, because I'm not a believer in line moves. But when I saw that Karl Anthony Towns was out, that made sense that it dropped from 8.5, ended up going off at 8. And even though you feel secure with the game, you could see watching it that once Maxey got going a little bit, he was missing a lot of open looks. That's what you got to watch a game for. But yeah, I kind of had a feeling I was barking up a tough tree after Towns was out and my bet was already in. So yeah, so that's kind of one of the things that makes it tough when you bet earlier. You kind of want to know. And the NBA is a different product now, where the load management kind of idea that now people all of a sudden an hour before the game time might decide, hey, maybe we're not going to play him. This guy, the matchups don't favor us. Meanwhile, you lose a big player and you don't know what's going on. So the Knicks are happy, and we're, as a gambler, we're upset. Knicks win the game, they get their done, and we don't win the money. So,
As they say, never lay points if you
right.
can avoid it. Never
Yeah.
lay points because your team ends up winning and you end up taking one on the chin there, as
Mhm.
if you just took a right hand from Ron Lyle and said, "Hey, wait a minute! I thought this guy was a stiff." He ends up having packing a pretty big wallop. I don't know if you get into this. Do you get in? And you're a football guy primarily, and you got all kinds of insight because of your years with the New York Giants organization, hanging around with Parcells. Do you get into any future prop bets on the NFL draft? Very popular,
Yeah.
I would think, with young people that are trying to speculate. And this Abdul Carter guy now supposedly may need surgery, foot surgery. It's not supposed to impede him for a long period of time, like an 8-week recovery program for this particular injury that he has, if he has the surgery. Of course, Drew Rosenhaus, who we know from here in South Florida, I've known Drew in a long, long time. His prospect and his client could turn up deceased. They could be wheeling him out of his house in a body bag, and Drew would still say, "That's not going to affect his status one bit."
Right.
But the speculation was that he may end up, because of trades on draft day or prior to draft day, possibly being the number one overall selection, which I would imagine you're getting a price on.
Mhm.
But would you look at something like that and immediately stay away from Abdul Carter either going 1 or 2 in the draft?
I think what you have to do is that's a game that you got to watch the line because somebody knows something. It's like betting the Academy Awards. Does it
Yeah.
ever leak? I remember when the Academy Awards were coming out, we could bet. Oh, I love to watch the Academy Awards. Let me bet. Then you see the best pictures minus 2,500 for 100. Well, they can't lose, And then if it does lose, it's like, well, how did no one know this? So the draft is kind of similar to a situation of someone knows something in the front office. They leak it to a reporter. The reporter says it. I know for a fact this is it. If you believe he's a real truthfully telling guy, you might want to listen to him, and that might change the line. So I just think there's a lot of inconsistencies. What I think you want to do if you're betting that is you take your team, you know what your team needs, like my Giants, and say, okay, here's what I think. Do I want Cam Ward or Shador Sanders? Everybody knows we need a quarterback. We're going to know after March 10th when free agency comes out. If we go after Matthew Stafford, which we're hearing the rumors that we want, but there's rumors every day. We like Shador Sanders one day. We like Cam Ward one day. We want Matthew Stafford. As crazy as this sounds, I'm not even against bringing in Aaron Rodgers. His numbers were great last year.
Wow.
Jets blew fourth quarter leads. If you get him for cheap and he could be and draft a guy, you have two guys in there. I'm not against any of those getting a really top-notch veteran quarterback to start the season. If things go south, we bring in the young guy and play it. In that case, if we make that move, maybe Travis Hunter falls to us. So that's a player that I'm intrigued with that I might say would go in the top 3. If I can get that line at minus 500, I might take it. So yeah, there's things like that. But if you know the teams that are in that top, where they're going to go, you can see where the draft might fall.
So you've soured on Tommy Cutlets? You don't think he's the answer?
I love his being a food critic, living in his mom's house. We all did that a little too late.
He went from Rayo's to Ragu.
Just, with fair weather fans in New York, probably cost us Jaden Daniels in the long run. When you look at it, winning those games probably changed, helped his life to stay with the organization, but didn't help the team in the future. I hate to say that because I hate the word tank. I don't like tank in gambling. I don't like tank in football. I don't like the tank at all.
It's disgraceful.
If I went out and played tennis against you, I'm not tanking. I'm coming at you to play. So it's like, I just hate that word. But, there's people today that use that regularly, and it bothers me that I just, as a team, and I want to win every game.
There's no way to administrate it or legislate it out of the game, but there should be some kind of movement on to assure. I mean, they've established these lotteries for that purpose, but and maybe it's time they did that in the National Football League as well. All right, we want to get to some action here, Mike Jones. You're already on one game, right? You like Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to embellish that anymore, but let's have your selections for the people because we want to help everybody out there bury their bookie. So what are you looking at, my friend?
Well, I'm going to have some fun again, stay in the NBA on a second game. Look at what Golden State's doing. 6-1 with Jimmy Butler. Coming down here to play Orlando. Only laying 5.5. Orlando's had their struggles. Kind of think that they might continue to ride this. I don't like laying points on the road, especially in the NBA. You don't know where a team goes. But I think the focus and where they are in the standings tells me Golden State has been a pretty good cover team since Jimmy went in there. I think that line's going to go up. So if you're grabbing something, maybe buy it down to 5 right now. If you get minus 120 or less, get on a number where you only lose at 4. Kind of one of my little tricks of the trade. I don't like to buy points. It's always a mathematically bad equation. But if you prevent a loss, if you're laying 5.5, you have to win at 6. If you take it down to 5, you got to push at 5, win at 6, and only lose at 4. So it's one of those things where you might want to do it. But I kind of like Golden State in that game. Orlando's just, I know Suggs is hurt and Wagner's hurt. They've been struggling a little bit all year, a little underachieving team. I might like Golden State in this spot.
They started out well. They looked like they were going to be a dynamic presence in the NBA, and then Banchero got hurt. They actually fared pretty well during segments of his absence. Mm-hmm. And yet come back down to reality now, as you said, still trying to get past a couple of key injuries. Okay, Golden State on the road, lay 5, buy it down, pay a little price, and you could find yourself in a winning spot. What else do you like, Mike?
All right. Big game in South Florida tonight. Game 7 rematch. The Edmonton Oilers come to town against the Florida Panthers. Panthers coming off a big win against Nashville the other night. And the Edmonton Oilers have not won a game since the All-Star break and look pretty lethargic doing so. Allowed a 7 spot against Washington, I believe. They lost 6-3 to Philly and got pummeled the other night 4-1 against Tampa. What? Not so fast. Maybe they're waiting for this particular game, I think.
Oh,
But they might want the rematch. So instead of taking a team that's hot, I'm going to go with a team that's not. I'm going to take a chance and go against my beloved Panthers and my fair weather friends. And I think one of these great things we can think about in gambling or techniques is saying, put your wallet not where your heart is. A lot of times I bet against my Giants because you think it's not right. You don't feel. Tonight's one of those nights. I think Edmonton comes down here and gets it done. This is the game they're shooting for, and knock off the Panthers. I'm going to give you a score of 4-3.
you've been dynamic on this also with your hockey scores and the accuracy, including in the championship game between Canada and the USA in the Four Nations thing.
I
Hit it
did.
right on the head at
Yeah.
3-2.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting approach, Mike Jones.
Yeah.
Here's Edmonton, losers of four straight, seem to be fading.
Mhm.
They got off to their traditional slow start this year and then rallied and became, again, one of the top teams and certainly worthy of consideration for a return trip to the Stanley Cup final. Panthers lost to the Kraken coming back out of the break, the NHL All-Star break, so to speak. And then have rattled off a couple of wins in a row. Matt Tkachuk out of the lineup now for an extended period of time, an injury that he incurred during the Four Nations finale there against Canada. So compromised by not having arguably their best players, certainly their biggest catalyst out there, aside maybe from Barkov. And yeah, man, the deflating feeling. These people are going to be leaving the arena in Sunrise tonight with their faces down in the gutter as the Edmonton Oilers roll in here and extract a little bit of revenge for what happened in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, according to Mike Jones, and definitely worth a shot. And I would imagine you're getting a pretty good price on that, no?
Well, I saw 110, and that was shocking to me. I think
Possible.
110 or 120. If I look at this, I look at my phone, and we go to the Hard Rock app, a legal place to play down here in Florida. I'm gonna say that it is. Hang on, let me do a little short here.
Yeah, minus 110 doesn't, or plus 110 doesn't seem like much of an advantage there for the better. Taking a road team that's in a big slump.
105 plus.
Wow.
Getting 105 with Edmonton. So
Strange line. That's a strange line on that game.
yeah, and a lot of those things that my guys talk about is how to read a line.
Yeah.
In other words, when it looks too obvious, and I'm one of the guys that probably goes against this theory, but getting more and more educated over time, they make sense. You know, that line 110, it goes up the Panthers. Who knows what it's going to go off at, but I like taking Edmonton as a dog. I just feel like sometimes these revenge games do mean something to these teams. And when a team's playing so bad, why not get healthy? Now, we were talking about this morning too. Edmonton is still the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. So here's a team with 4 games, but someone out there in the desert likes them at some point to take a run when they get to the playoffs, they'll get serious again. Well, I think the playoffs start tonight for them. This is a game they're going to get serious on. This is a team that took away what would have been one of the greatest achievements in sports to come back from down 3-0 to win a Stanley Cup. You know, I think they come out and we're ready to go. That's
That
just
guy in the desert that made that line might be out by the neon signs,
yeah, that's right.
waiting for Joe Pesci to show up. All right, any other action? I know you gave out Minnesota and
My guys are liking a little bit on the Montreal Canadiens lately. They got the Sharks coming in town, laying 210, a big number to lay. Another game when you're looking at it, I said, boy, they got to be laying a lot of wood. Canadians don't lay wood like this. Still looking outside in. Sharks have been struggling, going up to play in Montreal, living a leisure life with San Jose for the mental part of going up to Canada where it's probably minus 30. You know, a little bit, a little while to get the body loose in that weather. Maybe Montreal gets hot. Winners of 2 in a row. Maybe go for 3 tonight. Don't like laying the 210 a lot, but we'll take a chance right now, having a good week.
all right, there you go. 2 on the ice and two pro basketball games for Mike Jones. Big Gun, our podcast. When and where can we see that?
We took a night off last night. The Big Gunner podcast went 1-3. We were talking about Matthew Stafford to the Giants. Basic overview is that Brian Dable and Joe Shane have to win right away. You cannot sit here and tell me, as everybody, all these young podcasters want, that they can go out and get a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders and start off 1-6, and these guys are going to stay there because they're teaching a young quarterback what to do. They need to make a move now, and I think that's what you'll see out of this team. I was talking about that, and we'll continue that talk as we get to free agency in the next 10 days and then the draft on the 25th of April.
All right, look for that Big Gunner podcast with Mike Jones on nofilter.net. Mike, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much. Always good sharing time with you on these Thursdays. And thanks so much for being with us today on the program. And for everybody else out there, we'll have the professor tomorrow. He's been dynamic on college basketball and should have some more plays for you, plus the big board. So for Mike Jones, I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this morning's edition of Bury Your Bookie.